Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jodi Jones. Luke Mitchell, born in 1988, was the younger of two children. When he was 11, his parents separated, and he stayed with his mother without moving away. The family lived in the small, middle-class town of Eight Houses, Scotland. From a young age, Luke was well-behaved. He enjoyed horseback riding, excelled in school, and had a passion for music. He entered secondary school at St. David. However, during his teenage years, particularly in high school, he began to exhibit unusual behavior. At that time, he met a girl named Jodi Jones, who was almost 2 years younger than him. Jodi was born in 1989 in another small town in eastern Scotland. The country is generally known for having many small towns located close to one another. Jodi was the youngest of 3 children in a middle-class family. Both of her parents worked for the Royal Mail. She was calm, well-mannered, and did well in school. The school director even commented that she had a bright future due to her achievements in class and extracurricular activities. Family was very important to her, and she was a creative person who enjoyed poetry and painting. Jodi was close to her eldest sister, Janine. Interestingly, all members of the Jones family had names starting with the letter J, including their parents, James and Judy. The family was decent and appeared genuinely happy until 1998, when the father began experiencing mental health issues and ended his life tragically. This was a devastating blow to the family, and the mother, Judy, had to leave her job to take care of the 3 children. The tragedy affected not only Judy but also the children, who were very worried. Eventually, Janine moved to Mayfield briefly to live with her grandmother, because everything in the house reminded her of the incident. However, after some time, she managed to cope with her problems and returned to her family. Gradually, life returned to normal. Everyone adapted to living without a father, the mother went back to work, and the community supported the family. As a teenager, Jones showed a rebellious streak. She wanted independence and began to experiment with clothes and appearance, listened to heavy rock bands popular at that time, and got herself a piercing. Her mother resisted these changes, particularly when Jodi showed interest in alcohol and prohibited substances. She began experimenting with these substances at an early age. Around the time Jodi met Luke, they were both 14 years old. The two met at school, became friends, started skipping classes together, and began dating in February 2003. They were deeply in love, and even planned to marry. Jodi wrote in her diary that her feelings for Luke were serious and profound, not just a superficial crush. At the start of her relationship, Jodi didn't tell her friends or family about her boyfriend, Luke. For some reason, she kept him a secret. This hidden relationship went on for quite some time until she finally decided to share it. She confided in her older sister, Janine, revealing that she had a close relationship with Luke and felt very strong emotions for him. Janine understood the seriousness of the situation and informed their mother, Judy. Judy was of course shocked by the news, but was afraid of pushing her daughter away from her, so she decided to act very carefully. Judy wanted to meet Luke to understand him better, given Jodi's deep feelings, and asked Jodi to introduce them. In May 2003, Luke returned home with his girlfriend Jodi to meet her family and get to know them better. However, things didn't go as planned. Judy learned from Luke that Jodi was smoking and drinking with her friends, and Judy also discovered she had tried weed. This makes Judy worried about her daughter's increasingly close interactions and relationship with Luke. Even before the meeting, Judy had looked into Luke's background and learned about some of his unusual habits. Many local people had unfavorable words about him, seeing him as independent and daring, and occasionally rude, though he wasn't involved in any criminal activities. After a brief discussion, Judy was convinced that Luke was a bad influence on her daughter and that their relationship was risky. She forbade them from seeing each other and put her daughter under house arrest until June 30th, hoping this would help her focus on finishing the school year without distractions. However, Jodi's plan failed. Luke and Jodi continued to meet in secret. Jodi found a path Jodi used almost daily to sneak out and spend time with Luke. They would kiss near her home and share their frustrations about Jodi's strictness. Luke and Jodi was eagerly waiting for the end of house arrest to spend their summer vacation together. June 30th finally arrived, and Jodi, very much looking forward to it, was thrilled that house arrest would end. She looked forward to seeing Luke and spending time with him freely. As soon as it was 5 p.m., Jodi left home. She planned to meet Luke for an evening together. Jodi allowed her to go but set a curfew of 8 p.m. However, she did not return home at the appointed time, and Jodi couldn't reach her by phone. Worried that something was wrong, Jodi began searching for her daughter. When Jodi went to Luke's house, Jodi was not there. Concerned, she asked Luke about her whereabouts, but he said he hadn't seen her that day. She had not shown up for their meet. This seemed unbelievable, as Jodi had eagerly awaited this moment and had hurried to meet him. Jodi became angry, suspecting that he was lying. Jodi, distraught, did not believe him and demanded he answers, but he insisted he knew nothing. He agreed to accompany Jodi to search for she. Luke's parents owned a specially trained dog, so they decided to follow the route she was supposed to have taken. Since there was only one road linking the neighboring towns where they lived, so they searched this route, but did not find she, which was strange. She continued to ignore their calls and messages. Despite this, Jodi, Luke, and the dog persisted, keep searching over and over again, but still in vain. Finally, while walking the route again in the dark around 10:30 p.m., the dog picked up a scent in a wooded area and led them there. Luke followed the dog into the forest, using a flashlight. In the distance, he noticed something white on the ground near some walls. As he approached, he made a horrifying discovery. It was Jodi's half-naked, disfigured body, tied up. She had been killed in a particularly brutal manner, which deeply shocked both Jodi and Luke. Jodi became hysterical, trying to aid her daughter, but it was too late. She showed no signs of life, and her body had already cooled. The mother couldn't accept that her daughter was gone. Luke comforted Jodi's and called emergency services. Soon after, the police also arrived at the scene, and they were extremely shocked by this discovery. It was a literal bloodbath. Such violence had never occurred in this previously quiet area. Who could commit such a cruel act against a girl? The injuries of Jodi resembled those of Elizabeth Short, who was murdered in 1947 in Los Angeles. The girl's body was not only cut in half, but her internal organs were removed. Additionally, on her face was a Glasgow smile, which is a knife cup that extends from one ear to the other. This case is one of the most famous yet to be solved. Due to the similarity of injuries, so the case of the murdered Jodi Jones was dubbed Black Scotland by some media outlets. This gruesome incident caused widespread panic among residents of both communities. Locals fear that a vicious maniac has appeared in the area and expect new attacks. To calm the public, police needed to urgently solve the case and incarcerate the dangerous criminal before he struck again. The specially trained dog amazed everyone by leading the search party straight to the body. The girl was found in a hidden spot, known only to her, under a tree, where her and a friend's initials were carved. Some witnesses believed this was not a coincidence but a clue. Jodi's body had numerous cuts and stab wounds, primarily on her chest, neck, and head. Her arms had many cuts, indicating she actively tried to defend herself. Her neck was so damaged she was nearly decapitated. She was also severely beaten, with her hair pulled out. The girl was raped, and she died from strangulation. Forensic experts investigated the crime scene and discovered a used condom, along with DNA samples from 3 men on Jodi's body. These samples were sent to the lab for analysis. Despite public concerns about a serial killer, the police believed the murder was personal and Jodi was not a random victim. Naturally, suspicion fell on her boyfriend, Luke, whom she was supposed to meet. Typically, those close to the victim are involved in such cases. It was believed that Luke might have been the last person to see her. His calm demeanor and indifference to Jodi not meeting him as planned raised eyebrows. Why didn't he call or look for her? Perhaps because he already knew she was dead. Luke was considered suspicious by the police, so they decided to investigate him. Although he had no visible injuries, the numerous defensive wounds on Jodi suggested she must have left marks on him. His face and body would likely have been scratched. Jodi's mother, Judy, noted that her daughter's rebellious behavior began after meeting Luke, and she blamed him for everything, from her daughter's change in style to her daughter's murder. She claimed that Luke's negative influence had drastically changed her daughter. During that time, Jodi behaved so recklessly that she had to be put under house arrest. At school, in addition to her behavioral changes, she experimented with illegal substances. Jodi's mother, Judy, believed Luke was directly linked to these issues. Judy also argued that the dog didn't lead Luke to the body. She said he knew the location and led the dog straight to the crime scene. She opposed Luke so strongly that she asked him not to attend the funeral, partly to avoid media attention, as his presence at the service would have drawn interest from local newspapers. Rumors spread rapidly, and by the next day, the whole school knew what had happened. There were claims that Luke was involved in the brutal murder. Luke was known for being eccentric and called himself the town madman, but his oddities were never violent. Police suspect Luke is the one who killed Jodi, so they obtained a search warrant for his home to gather evidence and bring charges against him. While searching his room, detectives came across a peculiar picture in numerous bottles filled with urine. They didn't understand why he filled them and kept them at home. He did not provide any explanation for this. And this is just one of many strange things police discovered in his home during their investigation. His home was filled with satanic symbols, and he was notably obsessed with the singer Marilyn Manson. From the point of view of the investigation, all of this is not in the suspect's favor. However, could such eccentricities really indicate he was capable of a violent crime? In spite of his peculiar behavior, Luke denied any involvement in the crime. From the moment the police expressed their suspicions, he insisted that he loved Jodi and could never harm her. During his discussion with investigators, he mentioned a hair clip, and this raised suspicion as the hairpin was not seen when her body was discovered. Furthermore, his description of her clothing suggested he saw her later in the day, contradicting his claim that he hadn't seen her after school. According to him, she had different clothes and a hair clip at school, which didn't align with his story. The DNA on the used condom did not match Luke's. However, Luke's DNA was found on Jodi's bra among other unidentified samples. The police did not have enough evidence to charge him, but he was still the main suspect in the murder investigation and was called in for questioning. Investigators also spoke with his parents. Local residents' opinion of him turned very negative, and teachers at the school tried to isolate him from other students out of safety concerns but were unsuccessful. After 2 months, Luke returned to his class, not wanting to study separately. Consequently, the school administration had to suspend Luke from classes for the duration of the investigation. For the next 10 months, Luke remained the sole suspect. The police focused exclusively on him and did not consider other potential suspects. Ultimately, based on circumstantial evidence, Luke, 15 years old, was arrested for the murder of 14-year-old Jodi Jones. He also faced charges for possessing and carrying a knife in a school setting. One of the challenges in the investigation, besides the lack of evidence, was determining the motive for the murder. The police faced an issue because Luke was below the age of criminal responsibility. Later, it was revealed that the police committed several violations. Specifically, they were criticized for interrogating the 15-year-old without any adults present, such as his legal guardians or parents, and without a lawyer. The boy was pressured and forced to confess. During this time, law enforcement was more focused on building the case and finding evidence of Luke's guilt. They visited his home again and conducted another search of his room. His house was searched 3 times in total. Surprisingly, no blood was found in the house. However, many suspicious items were discovered and later used to accuse him of a brutal crime. Among these items, investigators confiscated a large number of Marilyn Manson CDs and copies of Manson's film Doppelhörs. A particular 10-minute scene in the film, where the main character committed a brutal crime against a black dahlia, was of great interest. Many drew parallels between the film and the real tragedy, leading to the belief that Luke was simply imitating his idols. Investigators suspected that Luke might have timed the massacre to coincide with a cult or ritual inspired by his favorite rock bands. He was eventually arrested, bringing relief to the city's residents, who viewed him as a murderer, Satanist, and psychopath, posing a danger to society. His eccentricities were publicly scrutinized, although they had not harmed anyone, until Jodi's murder. Rumors and sensational stories quickly spread. The case was heard in the Supreme Court of Edinburgh. However, Luke denied any involvement in Jodi's death. The prosecution argued that he was guilty of killing his girlfriend Jodi, pointing out that he discovered her body, even though he used a specially trained dog. Jodi's mother claimed that he brought the dog himself. Additionally, a witness reported seeing a man resembling Luke in a khaki jacket with Jodi near the crime scene, hugging, around the time before she passed away. However, this testimony has caused much controversy, as other witnesses reported seeing 2 men, and the witness ultimately could not positively identify Luke. At the trial, Luke's ex-girlfriend testified that he once threatened her with a knife, which frightened her greatly. However, he claimed he had an alibi, but it was unreliable. Luke's brother stated that on the day of the incident, he was alone in the house watching TV. However, their mother, Corinne, said she was at home with Luke at that time, and the brother was just in his room and mistaken. Despite this, the brother insisted he was alone, watching adult films, which he only did when no one else was home. Eventually, Corinne admitted she had lied, and Luke was indeed not at home. They faced consequences for this, and she was even held accountable. So, where was Luke? He never revealed his whereabouts, and it was impossible to track his phone. The prosecution presented a reconstruction of the events. According to the prosecutor, Luke and Jodi met near a tree with their initials a little after 5 p.m. About 50 minutes later, he was seen alone. The prosecution claimed that he was fascinated by the story of the Black Dahlia and had watched a film of the same name, which included a disturbing scene of a massacre. Witnesses mentioned that he occasionally smoked a pipe. Then, he allegedly contemplated acting out something he saw in the film and harmed Jodi. It was also revealed that he accused possessed a small case containing a knife, engraved with Jodi's initials and her birth and death years. The case also had a note stating that the best day of he was the one that never came, a quote from Kurt Cobain, who was his idol. While none of this directly proves a crime, but the prosecution interpreted these details as suspicious coincidences, all pointing to he. The prosecutor's office believed Jodi had been killed with a particular knife, but the knife vanished and couldn't be found for comparison. Luke couldn't explain its disappearance. Neighbors of Luke testified during the trial that on the evening of Jodi's death, Luke burned something in his backyard. The prosecution suspected that this was how he disposed of the clothes he wore during the crime. Witnesses mentioned that the fire had a strange odor. However, when police searched his house, they found nothing significant. They did confiscate a large steel barrel used for burning garbage. In total, 122 items were confiscated in connection to the case. Notably, a new khaki jacket which a witness had seen disappeared from Luke's house. The prosecutor suggested that he burned it to hide blood stains. The jacket, purchased by his mother shortly before the murder, was last seen on him that day and then mysteriously vanished, raising further suspicions. A witness, a friend of Luke, testified at the trial. He claimed to have had a strange conversation with Luke shortly before the murder. Luke allegedly said that the best way to kill someone was by cutting their throat and mentioned that Luke could imagine killing someone. That day, Luke was texting Jodi, with their last message exchange occurring between 16:35 and 16:54. After 1700 hours, Luke called the information service to ask for the exact time. This was puzzling because if he was at home, as claimed, he could have just checked his watch. The lawyers argued that there was no evidence against Luke. Besides Luke's DNA from 2 other men was found at the crime scene. But only one was identified. It belonged to a friend of Janine. The prosecution suggested that these traces were present because Jodi wore Janine's shirt. Luke's DNA was on her bras, and her DNA was on his pants, but since they were in an intimate relationship, the presence of their DNA on each other's clothes was considered irrelevant to the murder case. The defense contended that Luke was eccentric, a fact he didn't deny. Yes, he was a rude teenager interested in strange things, but none of these were direct indicators of guilt. The lawyers attempted to demonstrate that he couldn't have committed the crime against his girlfriend. The numerous stab wounds to the throat nearly detached her head from her body. Forensic experts counted about 20 wounds in the neck area alone, while Jodi fought back desperately. Luke would have certainly sustained defensive marks, yet no witnesses or police officers noticed any on him during the search. There were no scratches on his face or body. The lawyers argued that he didn't have a motive for murder. He loved his girlfriend and valued their relationship. Why would he murder her, especially on a day when all restrictions imposed by her mother were lifted? They shared a serious romantic relationship filled with tender feelings and rarely argued. It just didn't make sense. The case was highly controversial, ultimately left for the jury to decide. On January 20, 2005, the jury began their deliberation. After about 5 hours, they concluded that Luke was guilty of first-degree murder. On February 11th, the verdict stated that the 16-year-old would face at least 20 years in prison before eligibility for parole. However, many still doubted his involvement, believing that 2 people were involved in the murder. This thing allowed he to file several appeals, which were denied. Luke's mother had to sell their house and buy a smaller one to afford the legal fees. She fully supports her son and believes in his innocence. In 2019, a fund was established to raise money to support a man named Luke and to file new appeals on his behalf. However, the site hosting the fund eventually blocked it because it violated the site's terms. Despite these setbacks, Luke remained determined. Since 2003, when he was first accused of killing his girlfriend, he has consistently denied involvement. He made it clear that even if he were offered release in exchange for a confession, he would not accept it because he would never harm Jodi, his girlfriend. Luke had numerous supporters who, after hearing the guilty verdict in court, distributed flyers throughout the city proclaiming his innocence. So strong was their support that they even considered storming the prison. Their aim was to highlight what they believed to be Luke's wrongful conviction. However, their approach was questionable. Such actions could potentially harm Luke's case, and they also negatively impacted the Jones family, who were unjustly blamed for the situation and even received threats. In May 2007, the controversial trial resulted in the creation of a documentary about the case, which renewed interest in Luke's case. Moreover, this film revealed numerous irregularities committed by the police in charge of the investigation. Initially, the police considered Luke innocent, although they investigated him as a suspect. However, as more was learned about him, they found unconventional and unknown aspects. Most of the townspeople had a clearly negative opinion. Amid rumors and the extraordinary behavior of the town's eccentric, the investigation ceased to consider other people as suspects. All the evidence was circumstantial. Even Jodi's wounds, initially believed to resemble movie cuts, did not match so much. In fact, it was even questioned whether Luke was really a fan of Satanism and Marilyn Manson. He just followed some unpopular trends of his teenage years. To prove his innocence, Luke agreed to take a polygraph test on April 25, 2012. He passed the test successfully. 2 months later, the mother of he also underwent the polygraph test, and experts confirmed that both passed flawlessly. The documentary explored a theory that the murder might have been committed by a student who had written an essay about the murder of a girl in the woods a few weeks before Jodi's death. A friend of this student saw him shortly after the crime and noticed scratches on his face. Luke's family believes the investigation overlooked a crucial piece of evidence: condoms containing unknown male DNA. No DNA from Luke was found. They argue that the motive for the murder was rape, with the rapist attacking she and dragging her into the woods. They feel the investigation should focus more on this angle. Additionally, they claimed that when Jodi's mother came to Luke's house, he had not yet showered, yet there was no blood on him. They argue that if he were the killer, he would have showered and changed clothes immediately to wash off any blood. Years ago, the crime scene was vandalized with red graffiti referencing Jodi's murder. The message included a different name, suggesting that another person might be the murderer. This graffiti is believed to have been painted by Luke's supporters to assert his innocence. Luke's family hired 2 private detectives who identified several suspects, with Mark Kane among them. Mark was a local drug addict who died suddenly in May 2018 at age 38. Witnesses saw him at the crime scene on the day of the murder, with a scratched face and known to carry a knife. He claimed the scratches were from falling into bushes, but no one believed him given the context of Jodi's murder. However, despite his suspicious background, all suspects, including Mark, were eventually interrogated and cleared from the list. The family of Jodi is certain that the person who killed their daughter is Luke, the one currently in prison. They have no doubt about his guilt. Meanwhile, Luke's family continues their pursuit of justice. Almost 2 decades have passed since his imprisonment, and his legal team has accused investigators of multiple violations, notably the absence of forensic analysis on several DNA samples from Jodi, particularly those related to allegations of rape. This significant oversight has cast doubt on the conviction. Luke's lawyers are determined to overturn the sentence. Now 35 years old, Luke might be eligible for parole in 2025. However, he reportedly failed a random test this year. By regulation, after this point, the opportunity for parole will be postponed for another 3 years. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Liga Skromaine. Liga Skromaine was born in 1986 in Latvia, where she grew up in a close-knit family with an older brother and a younger sister. She later moved to Ireland, but remained close to her family. It was there that she met her future husband, Andrew Jordan. Despite struggling to connect with new people, the couple married 5 years later and shared big plans for their future. Liga worked at a hotel and lived modestly, but dreamed of opening a yoga retreat center in Portugal. Andrew supported her idea, and they saved money for 4 years to make it a reality. In early 2018, Liga was suffering from a severe skin condition that was affecting her physical and mental well-being. Her sister Ilse invited her on a trip to help her overcome this condition and regain her emotional balance. In February 2018, Liga and Ilse traveled to Thiruvananthapuram, the capital of Kerala, India, where Liga could receive Ayurvedic treatment for depression. Ayurveda, recognized by the World Health Organization since 1985 as one of the most effective alternative medicine systems, offered a promising solution for Liga's health issues. It's important to note that Ayurveda is not a cure-all, but rather a complementary approach to achieving healthy longevity. Liga, 33, and her sister Ilse traveled to Kerala seeking spiritual growth and relief from depression at an Ayurveda center. Their 6-week treatment plan included yoga, meditation, herbal remedies, and personalized nutrition and massage guidance. On March 14th, Liga skipped a yoga class, citing a headache. When Ilse returned to their room, Liga was gone. With the hotel staff's help, Ilse discovered that Liga had left the hotel at 11:30 a.m. in casual clothing, taking an auto rickshaw to Kovalam Beach for a walk. However, Liga was nowhere to be found on the beach, despite Ilse's thorough search until nightfall. Ilse reported her sister's disappearance to the police, but they showed little concern, believing Liga would either be found or return on her own the next day. Although they registered a case, the investigation was sluggish, effectively stalled from the start. Ilse took her sister Liga on a trip to India to share with her the country she loved so deeply. Tragically, the trip took a devastating turn. When the Indian police failed to take action for several days, Ilse decided to take matters into her own hands and began searching for Liga. She received support from friends and also informed her husband Andrew about Liga's disappearance, prompting him to fly to India immediately. After Liga went missing, her husband Andrew Jordan and sister Ilse launched a campaign to find her, reaching out to the local press and creating an online appeal. Ilse also tweeted to India's Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj, pleading for help and offering a 100,000 rupee reward to anyone with information about Liga's disappearance. Ilse and her friend Alexa, who had flown to India to help with the search, put up posters and distributed flyers in the Kovalam Beach area where Liga was last seen. Many locals joined the search efforts. However, it's important to note that Liga struggled with depression and found it difficult to interact with strangers. On the day she vanished, she took an auto rickshaw to the beach and was never seen again. At the time, she had about 3,000 rupees with her, but no passport, which meant she couldn't leave the country. Ashok Kumar, the head of the local police station, claimed that they had no leads in Liga's disappearance. Initially, the police believed she might have gone on a drinking binge or eloped and would eventually return on her own. However, persistent requests for help from Ilse and Andrew prompted the police to launch a search operation in the Kovalam Beach area where Liga was last seen. Although a woman's body was found washed ashore in Kanyakumari district, it was not identified as Liga's. Andrew suspected that Liga had been kidnapped by local gangs to be sold, and he attempted to infiltrate these gangs to gather more information. However, he was exposed and warned that if he continued to contact the gangs, he would have to leave the country. A month after Liga's disappearance, there were still no leads to her whereabouts. Ilse continued to search for her sister, visiting Kovalam Beach daily and observing people. She developed a theory that the only way to leave the beach unnoticed was by boat. Andrew returned to India on April 17, 2018, and joined Ilse in a new effort to find Liga, but her body remained unfound. The search for Liga was made more challenging due to her being a tourist and a citizen of another country. The Latvian Foreign Ministry maintained close contact with Liga's family and collaborated with the Indian authorities throughout the search process. The Latvian embassy also reached out to the Indian Foreign Ministry for special assistance in finding Liga. Additionally, the honorary consul of Latvia in India, whose jurisdiction includes the region where Liga went missing, was involved in the search efforts. At the request of the Coral state government, the Indian Navy and Air Force participated in the search operation. The search effort was extensive, utilizing an AN-32 transport plane, Gemini inflatable boats, underwater sonar, and 5 deep-sea divers. Unfortunately, Despite these efforts, Liga remained missing and the desired outcome was not achieved. By this point, everyone in the local community was aware of the missing tourist from Latvia and was supporting and sympathizing with Andrew and Ilse. On April 20th, 2018, Ila received the most awaited yet devastating call of her life. A body had been found in the mangrove jungle. She and Andrew rushed to the designated spot where the police were waiting to take them to the scene by boat. Elsa's heart was racing as she felt the overwhelming horror of the situation. As they arrived, Elsa was met with a gruesome sight. She recognized her sister's clothes, including the shirt and leggings, on the body. However, the jacket and shoes did not belong to Liga. It remained a mystery how Liga had ended up in this remote location, accessible only by going through Panatur from Samudra Beach. Two women came forward, confirming that they had seen Liga traveling alone into the mangrove forest. But the question remained, why would a girl struggling with depression, already alone, take a boat to such a remote and inaccessible place in the forest? The body was taken to the Medical College Hospital for an autopsy, which was recorded on video. The police stated that they couldn't confirm the identity of the body until DNA analysis was complete. According to the city police commissioner, the body was severely mutilated, with the head found nearby. Although the police have tentatively identified the deceased as Liga, a missing tourist, they need DNA confirmation. Supporting the investigators' conclusion is the fact that Liga's relatives identified the victim by her hair and clothes. One possible theory, according to India's rescue services, is that Liga might have been poisoned by accidentally or intentionally eating the fruit of poisonous pong-pong trees found in the mangrove forest. Between 1989 and 1999, over 500 people died from poisoning by these fruits in Kerala alone. The idea initially seemed absurd, given the body was found hanging upside down, without a head. However, if Liga had been poisoned, her body would likely have been in a different position, and her head would have been in place. Indian authorities were spouting absurdities based on misinformation about Liga's complex psychological issues. The investigators also considered the possibility that Liga had willingly abandoned her life. Ilse was concerned that the police would try to cover up her sister's murder by claiming she had voluntarily ended her life, despite the presence of a rope at the scene, which suggested the hiker had hanged herself. Elsa demanded a credible explanation for the missing head, and Ilse sarcastically retorted, "Don't tell me it's just lost." Here are the forensic test results that Ilse and the public were waiting for. The evidence is overwhelming. The autopsy reveals that Liga Skoma was strangled to death by multiple people during a violent attack. There were blood pools in her brain, bruising on her neck, and external injuries on her body, likely sustained during the struggle. Although the body was decomposing, the characteristic injuries on her throat cartilage indicate that someone forcefully squeezed her throat. The trauma was severe and fatal. Blood clots in her brain confirm strangulation, and bruises were found on her neck and legs, with a total of 9 wounds recorded on her body. Based on the autopsy results, the police no longer consider Liga's death to be voluntary. Instead, they believe she was murdered after putting up a struggle. Ilse, Liga's sister, felt a sense of relief that the police were now taking the case seriously and hoped they would soon find the killers. As part of their investigation, the police started questioning local drug dealers and card players. They also spoke to local residents, 2 of whom reported seeing Liga walking alone to the area where her body was later discovered. However, the police had doubts about the credibility of these eyewitnesses. Liga's family has criticized the Indian police, accusing them of incompetence. They believe that if the police had launched a search for Liga immediately, the tragedy might have been prevented. The 33-year-old Latvian tourist is thought to have been kidnapped from a nearby beach, taken by boat, and then strangled. A special team of investigators has been formed to find those responsible for the crime. So far, around 40 suspects have been questioned, and arrests are expected to be made in the coming days, once the authorities have gathered sufficient evidence. The Indian police conducted an investigation that led to the arrest of two men who were accused of murdering Liga Skran. According to the police, Liga Skran was lured by the two men, who then subjected her to physical abuse before dismembering her body. The two alleged assailants, now in custody, were local dealers of illegal substances. Both suspects, who were also pimps, fully confessed to the crime while under interrogation. However, the autopsy did not provide much evidence due to the advanced state of decomposition of Liga Skran's body. Andrew Jordan filed a petition in Superior Court to review a felony murder case, suspecting that more people were involved in the woman's murder. He noted that both defendants had recanted their guilty pleas, suggesting that they may have confessed due to torture, a common practice in India. However, the Supreme Court of India denied the murdered woman's common-law husband a review of the case, citing a lack of direct evidence. Andrew was outraged when the trial was postponed for 2 months. He had previously accused the authorities and police of incompetence and attempting to cover up the murder to avoid scaring off tourists. The suspect's lawyers requested and received a postponement, which they are legally entitled to do once without providing a reason. Andrew believed that the more the case was delayed, the more likely it was that the investigation was flawed. Despite his concerns, both suspects remained in custody. An investigation into Liga Skran's murder revealed that two men, Umesh, 32, and Udayakumar, 28, offered her drugs, specifically Ligaskani weed, and then strangled and decapitated her after she was incapacitated. The two suspects were arrested and found to have a history of committing similar crimes on multiple occasions. They worked for a food delivery company in Kerala's capital city and moonlighted as illegal tour guides. Umesh and Udayakumar have been charged with multiple crimes, including destruction of evidence, murder, poisoning, kidnapping, and rape. The location where Liga's body was discovered had previously been used by Umesh as a meeting spot for his male clients. He has a long history of criminal activity, with 13 cases filed against him, including 6 for sexual assault and 1 for attempted murder. Several of Umesh's victims have come forward to testify against him. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Liga with the two men in the area. Initially, they denied any involvement, but after Liga's body was found, they confessed to the murder, which was committed during an act of violence. The suspects were arrested, but initially claimed they only saw Liga in Kovalam. After repeated questioning, they eventually pleaded guilty. On December 6, 2022, the court sentenced the two men to life in prison and ordered them to pay 65,000 rupees each in compensation to Ilsa, Liga's sister. India has seen a surge in violent crimes against young girls, with a high number of sexual offenses committed against minors. In response, the government has introduced the death penalty to address the acute problem of crime in the country. The persistence of Liga's relatives, particularly her sister, and the involvement of the press and an influential MP were crucial in ensuring the case was thoroughly investigated. Initially, the local police were not taking the case seriously, suggesting that Liga may have voluntarily disappeared. This is not an isolated incident in this area, where similar cases have occurred before. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Ann Wood. Sarah Ann Wood was born on March 4, 1981 in New York. Raised in a devout family, her father served as a pastor in a small town in the state's middle. From a young age, Sarah, along with her older sister and brother, attended services at her father's church and Sunday school. Dancing was her passion, poetry brought her joy, and she was an enthusiastic member of her school's cheerleading team. Sarah loved nothing more than riding her bike, often using it to get to her father's church, less than a mile from home, for services, Sunday school, or to lend her father a hand. On August 18, 1993, when Sarah was 12, she rode her bike to church for Sunday school, following her usual routine. With her father staying home, the classes were conducted by other church members. Her parents expected her to return immediately after the classes, but as time passed and she failed to appear, they grew increasingly anxious. After waiting a little longer, they headed to the church, thinking Sarah might have lingered behind with friends, but she was nowhere to be found. The Sunday school teachers reported that she had departed on her bike soon after classes, taking with her a few books, some colorful folders, and a small display board. Her parents' concern escalated because the ride home from church should have taken only a few minutes, and it was unlikely Sarah would have gone elsewhere with all those items. Moreover, she always sought permission before deviating from her routine. Her parents retraced the route to the church, inquiring with neighbors if anyone had seen their daughter, leveraging the small town's familiarity and Sarah's father's church connections. Dozens of people quickly joined the search, and they soon found a witness who had seen Sarah riding towards her house around 2:30 p.m., just a few hundred yards from her home. This sighting only intensified her parents' anxiety, convinced that something had indeed happened to Sarah, prompting them to contact the police. The local police department swiftly launched a search operation, deploying dozens of officers to scour the area. The sheriff also requested assistance from the fire department, and they joined forces to aid in the search. News of Sarah's disappearance spread rapidly throughout the community, prompting dozens of volunteers to join the effort. Within the first few hours, several hundred people were involved in the search. The police concentrated on the route from the church to Sarah's home, meticulously searching the fields and woods on both sides of the road. Their efforts soon yielded a disturbing discovery. Just a few yards into the woods, they found Sarah's bike leaning against a tree. The police centered their focus on that area and quickly uncovered the items Sarah had brought from Sunday school, hidden beneath a nearby bush. These findings led investigators to a grim inference. It was likely that Sarah had been abducted. They theorized that an unknown assailant might have dragged her from the road into the woods, left her belongings behind, and then taken her away in a vehicle. The police department launched an all-out search effort, pouring all its resources into finding Sarah. Meanwhile, her restless relatives took matters into their own hands, printing flyers with details of her disappearance and distributing them not only in their hometown, but also in surrounding cities, with the help of dozens of volunteers. Despite their collective efforts, the first day's search yielded nothing. Police and volunteers scoured the area within a several-mile radius of the road until nightfall, but no new leads emerged. The search resumed the next morning, with even more people joining the effort. The state police also joined the investigation, focusing on identifying a potential suspect. Investigators questioned every resident in town, hoping someone might have spotted a suspicious stranger or vehicle linked to Sarah's disappearance. Sarah's parents set up an improvised headquarters, manned by dozens of volunteers, who printed and distributed flyers, scouring for witnesses or leads that could bring them closer to finding Sarah. As local media picked up the story, news of her disappearance spread nationwide within days. The police received over 1,000 tips, meticulously investigating each one, but repeatedly hit dead ends. Concerned residents helped the parents raise a substantial $150,000 reward for any information about Sarah's whereabouts. But unfortunately, this too yielded nothing. The active phase of the search continued for about a week, before the police concluded they were unlikely to find valuable leads in the area. They shifted their focus to finding a potential suspect, scrutinizing local residents and convicted criminals from neighboring towns, but to no avail. Sarah's disappearance was featured on 2 popular national television shows, triggering a new wave of tips. Her parents made regular appeals to the public through the media, pleading for any information about their daughter's whereabouts, but her fate remained a mystery. This continued for nearly 6 months, until a surprising breakthrough occurred. On the morning of January 7, 1994, 12-year-old Rebecca left her home in a small Massachusetts town and set out on her walk to school. As she strolled down a deserted street, she noticed a man walking alongside her. He attempted to speak, but Rebecca couldn't hear him due to her headphones. When she removed them, the man brandished a gun and warned her that if she obeyed his every command, he wouldn't harm her. He grasped her jacket, and they continued walking in the same direction. Rebecca was terrified to scream or attempt to flee, aware that even if she complied, the man might still kill her. As they walked, she quickly devised a plan. Feigning an asthma attack, she struggled to breathe and sat down on the ground. The man released her jacket, instead gripping the edge of her backpack as she continued to act as if she were suffocating. Seizing the moment, Rebecca slipped out of the backpack straps and sprinted away from her kidnapper. A few hundred yards away, she spotted several adults and rushed towards them, exclaiming that someone had just attempted to abduct her. Meanwhile, the kidnapper sped away in his car, taking Rebecca's backpack with him. One of the witnesses took it upon himself to tail the kidnapper in his own vehicle. After a few minutes, the witness pulled over at the nearest gas station and alerted the police. The witness was able to provide a partial license plate number and the car's model, while Rebecca gave a detailed description of the kidnapper's appearance. The police promptly launched a search for the vehicle, scouring databases for matching cars. They also sent out alerts to neighboring towns, and their efforts were rewarded that very evening. A patrol officer driving through a nearby small town spotted a vehicle matching the description. He pulled over and knocked on the door of the house where it was parked. Inside, he found several people, and upon inquiring about the pickup truck, the owner explained that he hadn't driven it in a while due to his loss of sight. He revealed that his neighbor, 43-year-old Louis Lint, frequently borrowed the truck. Louis, a handyman, assisted his blind neighbor with various household tasks in exchange for using the pickup truck. According to Louis, he last drove the truck the previous day and hadn't used it since. Nonetheless, the officer asked him to come to the station for questioning, and Louis complied. Despite his earlier denial, Louis continued to insist that he hadn't used the pickup that day and had no involvement in the attempted abduction. He claimed to be a devout Christian who spent most of his free time at church and would never engage in such an act. While Louis was at the station, the police took his photograph and presented it to Rebecca and other witnesses in a photo lineup alongside pictures of other men. Unanimously, they identified Louis as the kidnapper. Investigators promptly obtained a warrant to search Louis's house and the vehicles, including the pickup truck owned by his neighbor. Their search yielded a disturbing discovery: a small bag containing duct tape, a knife, children's sunglasses, and candy in Louis's van, which was parked near their house. Additionally, the police found a gun and Rebecca's backpack inside the house. Investigators uncovered a shocking discovery: a large, secret room dug out beneath the house, still under construction. With this substantial evidence, the police arrested Louis for the attempted abduction. Initially, he maintained his innocence, but soon decided to confess to everything. He admitted to traveling to Rebecca's town in search of a victim, bringing along his kidnapping bag that he always kept in his car. Louis then explained the purpose of the secret room he was digging under his house, and his story left even the police stunned. He revealed that he planned to convert it into a fully equipped bunker where he intended to hold kidnapped victims captive. Louis confessed to aiming to abduct 11 girls between the ages of 12 and 17 to satisfy his horrific fantasies. He added that until the room was completed, he didn't plan to keep his victims there for long, intending to kill them within a few days. In Louis's house, the police also found a list of several names. Upon identifying these individuals, they realized they were all children living in close proximity to Louis's home. Following his confession, Louis was placed in jail awaiting trial for attempted abduction. Investigators continued to visit him to gather additional information, and during one of these visits, he unexpectedly confessed to another crime. Louis revealed that 4 years prior, in October 1990, He was working as a janitor at a movie theater in the same town where he later attempted to kidnap Rebecca. On the evening of October 22nd, he left work and spotted 12-year-old James Bernardo riding his bike near the parking lot. Lewis instantly decided to abduct him, intending to assault him. Lewis offered James $5 to help set up chairs in the movie theater, and the boy agreed. Lewis led him to the empty theater where he bound him. He then drove his van closer to the entrance, dragged the boy and his bike inside, and took him to his home. He left the boy there and drove to a nearby lake to dispose of the bike by throwing it into the water. Lewis returned home and attempted to assault the boy, but was unsuccessful. Frustrated, he decided to dispose of the victim. He dragged him into his van and drove to a neighboring state, where he murdered the boy and left the body in the forest. A hunter soon discovered the body and reported it to the police. However, despite their efforts, detectives were unable to identify the culprit over the course of several years. Now, upon comparing Lewis's statement with the case materials, investigators discovered that he had provided an astonishing number of facts and details about the crime that perfectly mirrored reality. Following Lewis's confession, news of his case spread like wildfire throughout the country. Within just a few days, police realized they were dealing with a man who not only had attempted to abduct a girl and was building a secret bunker for other victims, but had also confessed to a murder that no one had suspected him of. New York investigators searching for Sarah Wood soon caught wind of Lewis's case. They delved into the details of Rebecca's attempted abduction and requested more information about Lewis himself. Interestingly, profilers had previously created a profile of Sarah's potential abductor, and Lewis seemed to fit it remarkably well. The investigators decided to pay him a visit and headed to the prison. During the interrogation, he revealed that frequent visits to the neighboring state were motivated by close family ties. Lewis also admitted that he would often drive through small towns in search of victims, and on August 18, 1993, he spotted Sarah walking along the road with her bike. According to his statement, he pulled up beside her, got out of the car, and forced her into the van at gunpoint. He then tied her up, dragged her belongings and bike into the nearby woods to conceal them, and drove her hundreds of miles to the mountains. In a remote area by a large lake, he assaulted and killed her, eventually burying her body in a hole. The police launched an extensive search effort around the lake, mobilizing hundreds of volunteers, park rangers, and the military. However, the vast size of the lake posed a significant challenge, making it nearly impossible to cover the entire area, even with such a large search team. Furthermore, with months having passed since the burial, the location could have become overgrown with vegetation. After weeks of searching, they were unable to find either the body or any evidence. Detailed testimony with precise details of the abduction was sufficient to charge Lewis with the murders of both Sarah and 12-year-old James. In January 1995, Lewis was sentenced to 17 to 20 years in prison for the attempted abduction of Rebecca. The following June, the trial for James's murder began, and Lewis pleaded guilty before the judge. He confided in his lawyer that he wanted to confess to Sarah's murder immediately, but when he entered the courtroom and saw her parents, he abruptly changed his mind. However, just 9 days later, when he was brought into an empty courtroom, he finally admitted his guilt. Despite this, he persisted in refusing to disclose the burial site, ignoring the desperate pleas from Sarah's parents. The prosecution offered Lewis a deal in exchange for information about Sarah's whereabouts. In return, they promised to serve his sentence in a state prison instead of a federal prison, as Lewis had requested. He agreed and began collaborating with investigators. Lewis identified a specific area near the lake and even sketched a rough map. Although the police wanted to take him along on the search, his lawyer cautioned against it. Undeterred, the police organized extensive searches in this area, braving the snow and freezing temperatures, with the help of hundreds of volunteers and heavy equipment. Despite their efforts, they were still unable to find Sarah. Several months later, with Autumn's arrival, the police launched another attempt, but it ultimately proved unsuccessful. Throughout this period, detectives endeavored to extract more specific information from Lewis, but he persistently refused to divulge the exact location or assist the police in their search. Eventually, the prosecution opted to revoke the deal, and on April 11, 1997, Lewis was sentenced to 25 years in prison, the maximum sentence the judge could impose without the discovery of the body. The judge added that if such evidence were available, he would have certainly handed down a death sentence. During the trial, Lewis's lawyer attempted to mitigate the punishment in all three cases without disputing his client's guilt. He argued that Lewis suffered from an unidentified mental disorder, citing claims of hearing voices in his head and alleged protection by aliens. However, experts found no evidence of any mental disease and concluded that Lewis was likely feigning these symptoms to avoid severe punishment. After the verdict, detectives persisted in visiting Lewis in prison, hoping to coax him into revealing Sarah's burial site. His behavior was erratic, and he provided contradictory information, naming different locations. On one occasion, he claimed he wasn't ready to disclose the location because he had buried Sarah alongside another victim, and he didn't want anyone to uncover the identity of this other person. Despite the emotional pleas of Sarah's parents, who also visited Lewis in prison, he remained resolute in his silence. The detectives were also exploring Lewis's potential involvement in other unsolved cases. Having confessed to the abductions of Sarah and James, the police had little doubt that he had additional victims. Almost immediately after his arrest, they uncovered another attempted abduction he had made several years prior. Lewis had tried to grab a girl off the street, but her father intervened, and they reported the incident to the police, although detectives couldn't identify the perpetrator until Lewis's photo appeared in the news. Lewis was also suspected of being involved in 4 unsolved disappearances between 1985 and 1992, and investigators concluded that he had the capability to commit these crimes, but no evidence was found, and Lewis refused to confess. Despite this, his story didn't end there. Detectives continued to visit him after his sentencing, hoping he would reveal Sarah's whereabouts or confess to other crimes. However, it wasn't until 2013 that Lewis suddenly had a change of heart and confessed to another murder. He admitted to being responsible for one of the crimes he was suspected of. According to Lewis, on November 6, 1992, he abducted a 16-year-old teenager with developmental disabilities who was riding a bike to his grandmother's house. He claimed to have forced the boy into his van, then killed him and dumped his body in a lake. Investigators confirmed his involvement based on his detailed description of the events, although official charges in the case have yet to be filed against him to this day. Currently, Lewis is 73 years old and remains incarcerated for 2 murders and an attempted abduction. Sarah's parents hold on to the hope that they will eventually persuade him to reveal the location of her burial site, or that he will divulge this secret before his death. In memory of Sarah, her relatives also organize an annual bike ride. Initially attended by just a few people, the event has grown steadily, with several thousand participants now regularly taking part. This event also helps raise significant funds to support efforts to locate missing children. The police are determined to find Sarah's burial site and are not giving up, even if Lewis is not willing to help them. They will keep searching the areas he has pointed out until they locate her body. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in the city of Allamont Springs, Florida. She had an older brother, a younger sister, and loving parents. Her father worked as a construction worker, often traveling to other states for several days, leaving the kids alone with their mother. Jessica was a cheerful and lovely child. She liked to spend a lot of time outdoors with friends, play with her siblings, and she also had a deep love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when Jessica was 9 years old, her family decided to visit her grandparents for Easter. That day, her father went to the store to buy some items for the holiday, while her mother stayed in their apartment, packing for the upcoming trip. Jessica returned home from school with other children and asked her mother if she could go to the yard. She wanted to wait for her father, who was expected to return from the store soon. Her mother agreed and told her daughter not to go anywhere else. Their apartment complex was situated away from the main road, surrounded by trees, and the mother felt relatively secure about Jessica's safety. All the neighborhood children, including Jessica, always played there without constant adult supervision, and everything had been fine. A few hours later, around 6 p.m., her father returned home and asked his wife where Jessica was. She was surprised, as her daughter was supposed to be in the yard waiting for her father, but he claimed she wasn't there. The parents went outside and searched the entire yard, but they couldn't find Jessica. Frustrated, they decided to check with neighbors, hoping someone had seen their daughter. One neighbor mentioned seeing Jessica in the yard earlier. She was sitting on a bench and reading a book, but that didn't help the worried parents find her. As darkness fell and their daughter remained missing, they decided to call the police. Officers arrived in a few minutes, initiated a search, and started interviewing neighbors. Despite their efforts, they couldn't find Jessica, so the police expanded the search area to nearby streets. A few hours later, an unexpected call came into the police station. The caller provided sparse details, but the police raced to the pumping station, finding Jessica's body hidden nearby in a trash bag, mere yards from the road, but obscured by the bridge's location. Personal effects by the corpse suggested the tragic circumstances. Meanwhile, the investigators focused on tracing the 911 call. It was evident that the call came from the murderer, and the police hoped it could help identify them. But there was a challenge. The call was made from a public payphone at a gas station less than a mile from the crime scene, and by the time the officers arrived, the perpetrator had already vanished. Detectives tried to find fingerprints on the phone, but it was a challenge. It was a public payphone, so there might be multiple prints. Moreover, investigators realized that the criminal had likely wiped the phone after the call or used gloves. Experts concluded that Jessica was killed elsewhere, and her body was transported to the water pumping station. Traces on the ground in front of the facility indicated that the killer likely pulled the body from a vehicle in a trash bag and dragged it across the ground. Jessica's clothing was intact, except for one shoe. Police couldn't find it in the bag or in the surrounding area. The only lead found at the crime scene was the tire track on the ground. Police couldn't be certain it belonged to the killer's vehicle, but they photographed it and made a cast. Medical experts examined the body and determined that the victim died from strangulation based on marks on her face and neck. It seemed the killer had used their bare hands. A partially digested hamburger was found in her stomach, which she had consumed less than an hour before her death. Her mother stated that she had not provided Jessica with any such food that day, leading the police to believe that the meal was provided by the killer. Experts also found no signs of sexual assault, leaving the motive of the perpetrator entirely unclear. Initially, the police began to consider Jessica's parents as suspects, as neither of them had a solid alibi. At the time of Jessica's disappearance, her mother claimed she was packing in the apartment, and the father was shopping. Theoretically, they both had the opportunity to commit the crime. The police tried to understand how the killer managed to take Jessica from her complex's yard without anyone noticing or Jessica screaming. This led them to believe that the perpetrator likely knew the victim well, and she left with him willingly. Another supporting factor was the tone of the killer's voice during the 911 call. Despite the experts' efforts to clean up the recording, they noticed sorrow and regret in the killer's voice, as if they genuinely regretted committing the murder. The fact that the killer took the risk of calling 911 spoke volumes. The perpetrator could have done it either for the thrill of playing with the police and manipulating the investigation, or they genuinely regretted their actions and wanted to somehow alleviate that feeling. Considering the caller's evident sadness, investigators leaned towards the second option. Police inspected Jessica's father's car, finding something intriguing in the trunk. There was a roll of black trash bags similar to the one containing the victim's body. However, an expert examining the bag from the crime scene quickly determined it differed from those found in the father's car, clearly belonging to a different roll. So the man was temporarily ruled out as a suspect, and investigators shifted their focus to others. Forensic experts carefully examined the victim's clothing and body for potential clues, uncovering a few leads. They discovered a substantial amount of dog hair, despite the fact that Jessica's family did not own a dog, suggesting the animal belonged to the killer. Additionally, they found human hair on her body belonging to an unknown white male. However, the experts required a few days to extract the DNA profile. Two types of foreign fibers were also discovered on Jessica's clothes. Through analysis of their structure, the experts concluded that one likely came from a car seat cover and the other from a carpet, further supporting the theory that the victim was killed elsewhere and transported to the water pumping station by car. Regarding the dog hair found on Jessica's clothing, experts attempted to determine the breed using the FBI's database, which contained microscopic photos of hair from various dog breeds. This database has been helpful in criminal cases where dog hair could be crucial evidence. Experts compared the hair sample with the database, ruling out one breed after another. Ultimately, they concluded that the hair on the victim's clothes belonged to a Shar-Pei. It appears the killer owned a Shar-Pei, and the hair ended up on Jessica's clothes, either in the perpetrator's vehicle or at their residence. According to the preliminary theory of investigators, the killer somehow might have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to McDonald's for a hamburger, and then brought her to his home and murdered her. Meanwhile, the experts attempted to enhance the phone call recording, but it proved to be a challenging task. They decided to try a different approach and sought assistance from NASA. NASA had advanced tools for clearing audio recordings, originally designed to enhance recordings from space. They agreed to help and provided the police with a higher quality audio track. However, the experts still needed a voice sample from the suspect to compare it with the call recording and establish a match. Based on the detectives' assumption that the killer might have known Jessica, they decided to play the call recording for her mother, hoping she could recognize it. She listened to it for the first time and said that the voice sounded familiar, but the mother couldn't remember whose voice it is. However, during a second attempt, it clicked. She recognized the voice as their neighbor who lived in the same complex, although she couldn't remember his name. She told the detectives that the man often walked his Shar-Pei in the yard. Police swiftly identified the man as 35-year-old James Crow. During the initial hours of Jessica's disappearance, investigators had already questioned him along with other neighbors. He mentioned that he saw her in the yard while walking his dog, and they spoke briefly before he left. Detectives dug into his background and found that Crow had no criminal history. He lived with his wife, who was a nurse. The man was a former truck driver, currently unemployed, and he spent most of his time strolling the streets with a Shar-Pei named Pumpkin. The detectives realized that merely the similarity in voice and owning a dog of a specific breed wasn't enough for an arrest, so they obtained a search warrant for his car. They discovered two disturbing clues. Under the front passenger seat, there was an empty Happy Meal bag, even though Jessica had a McDonald's hamburger in her stomach and James didn't have children. This seemed highly suspicious. Experts also noticed that the car had brand new tires, as if they had barely been used. Police found out that Crow replaced them on the day of Jessica's murder, even though his previous tires were not particularly old and could have lasted for several more years. Crow claimed to have left the old tires at a car service, which was quite unusual considering they were not old at all. So the police headed to this service building But by the time they arrived, there was only one tire from James's car left. They compared its tread pattern from what was found near the body, but detectives faced an unexpected twist. They didn't match. However, they initially weren't 100% sure that the tire mark on the ground was left by the killer's car and not some other vehicle, as maintenance staff regularly visited the building, and this tire mark could have belonged to their vehicle. The police also searched James's apartment, where they found a new lead, a box containing several rolls of trash bags matching the size and color of the one found on the victim's body. Obviously, this couldn't be considered strong evidence, so detectives had to figure out if there was a way to establish that the bags had come from the same roll. At first glance, this task seemed impossible. The bags themselves had no markings or distinctive features, and there were hundreds of manufacturers of such products. But even the detectives were soon surprised by the creativity they could display in such a complex challenge. They contacted N.L. Roberts, the man responsible for quality control at the company that produced the bags found in the suspect's apartment. At first, he identified the specific factory where the bags were produced, as there was a special code on the cardboard box containing the rolls, indicating that the product was made at a facility in Virginia. The expert then explained that a tiny amount of iron or titanium is included in the composition of the bags, depending on their color. Considering that the factory produces bags of various colors, the materials in the production are constantly changing, and the ratio of plastic to iron or titanium literally changes daily, since such tiny amounts cannot be measured with 100% accuracy, and there's no need to do that. In other words, experts could take bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene, measure the presence of the elements in the plastic using high-intensity X-rays, and get a very precise ratio. Through this analysis, they found that the ratio of iron and titanium to plastic in both bags was absolutely identical, indicating that they were manufactured on the same day and should belong to the same batch. But that's not all. During the production of trash bags, a small amount of microscopic debris ends up on the machines, which is acceptable within production standards. However, this results in small streaks visible to the naked eye when the plastic sheets later cut into bags are rolled out. These streaks are present on every bag in large amounts, forming a unique pattern for each roll of fabric. The debris particles on the conveyor belt are constantly moving, falling off and being replaced by new ones. So the pattern of similar streaks is preserved for a maximum of a few hundred feet of fabric. This means that it can be understood from this pattern that two different bags were not just made within the same batch, but within a few hours of each other. Experts compared the bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene, and the lines on them matched with astonishing precision. But that's not all. The experts also explained that after the bags are manufactured, they are rolled into a bundle using a machine, which often does this somewhat unevenly. However, if you don't look closely, these deviations are almost imperceptible and the rolls appear smooth. Examining the edges of the bags, however, reveals tiny folds and creases, forming a similarly unique pattern as with the streaks. In the end, the experts compared the bags again and found that the pattern on the bags from James's apartment matched the one from the crime scene. They concluded that the bag used by the killer was not just produced by the same company, but was manufactured within a range of almost 17 boxes apart. This meant that with a high degree of probability, the perpetrator took the bag from one of the rolls in James's apartment. Forensic analysts also compared the two types of fibers found on Jessica's clothing with the carpet in the suspect's apartment and the covers of his car seats. Both samples matched. Finally, a sound expert compared the 911 call recording with a voice sample from James and concluded that the voice belonged to the same person. Despite the incredible work done by the experts, detectives faced one major problem. All this fell into the realm of circumstantial evidence, but they were confident in James's involvement and decided to arrest him. The man was taken into custody, and the prosecution announced its intent to seek the death penalty. Considering that James continued to deny his guilt, the case proceeded to trial. The prosecution presented their version of how the crime happened. James spent a lot of time outside with his dog, and all the local kids knew him well. According to the police version, on that day, James noticed Jessica alone on a bench while walking his dog and started a conversation. He offered to take her to McDonald's, promising to buy her a hamburger, and Jessica agreed because she knew him well. After the restaurant, he presumably took her back to the apartment complex and invited her to his place. Perhaps he offered her to play with Pumpkin, his dog. His wife was at work, and the presence of carpet fibers from his living room on Jessica's clothes indicated that she was there on the day of her death. According to investigators, James might have attempted to assault Jessica, but something went wrong. Based on the forensic report, the perpetrator not only strangled the victim with his bare hands, but also pressed his palm against her face, perhaps because Jessica tried to scream, and he panicked and attacked her. After Jessica passed away, he placed her in a garbage bag to transport the body to his car without arousing suspicion from the neighbors. He drove a few miles and left the body near a water station, made the 911 call from a nearby gas station, and returned home. During the preliminary hearings, James's lawyers attempted to challenge all available evidence, arguing that there was no solid proof of their client's guilt. Despite the fact that the judge accepted the evidence, the defense was right. In cases involving the death penalty, the standards for evidence are much higher, and in James' case, there was a significant chance of avoiding this sentence. In light of these circumstances, a plea deal was proposed to the suspect. Under the terms of the deal, he would admit guilt to second-degree murder and receive a 40-year prison sentence without parole, thus avoiding the death penalty. In the summer of 1998, 2 years after the murder, James agreed to the deal. He wasn't required to disclose any details of the crime, but he mentioned that part of his decision was to spare Jessica's family and save them from going through the trial. The prosecution believed that the perpetrator genuinely showed remorse, citing his 911 call, the purpose of which remained unclear. The only logical explanation in this context was that James sincerely wanted to alleviate his guilt for such a heinous crime. Jessica's parents were not pleased with the deal, as they had hoped for the death penalty, and they also wanted the killer to confess. But James remained silent. Nevertheless, he didn't live to see the end of his term. James passed away in November 2011 at the age of 49 due to health problems, taking the details of his actions and motives with him to the grave. Jessica's case involved truly unique work by experts and detectives. The amount of information they gathered by examining ordinary garbage bags astonished even the judge, who had never encountered such evidence throughout his career. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lori Vallow. The case of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, often to as the Doomsday Spouses, highlights crimes driven by extreme religious beliefs. Such incidents are not rare in criminal practice. Statistics show that over 100,000 people worldwide fall victim to religious fanatics annually. These victims frequently do not align with the fanatics' orthodox views. A few years ago, the disturbing of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell shocked the world and remain unresolved to this day. Media outlets across various countries have covered their story, leaving many horrified and puzzled. Tragically, 5 members of their own families, including 2 children, became victims. Currently, legal proceedings against these individuals are ongoing. They face capital punishment for their heinous acts. Despite this, they deny their guilt and hope to escape severe punishment or receive minimal sentences. Let's start from the beginning to try to understand this horrifying and complex story. How did people who claim to have found God completely lose their sense of humanity? Chad Guy Daybell was born on August 11, 1968 in Provo, Utah. He grew up in a simple, humble family and was known as a quiet, shy child. As a student, Chad was average. He had no notable academic or athletic achievements and was self-conscious about his weight. After finishing high school, Chad enrolled at Brigham Young University in Utah with some difficulty, but ultimately graduated in 1992 with a bachelor's degree in journalism. During his college years, he married Tammy Douglas, a modest girl, and they quickly had 5 children: sons Seth, Mark, and Garth, daughters Emma and Leah. Post-graduation, Chad worked as an editor at a local daily newspaper while balancing his role as a young father. Despite the family's ongoing financial hurdles, he took on additional roles as a night watchman at a small church and as a grave digger at the nearby cemetery. Tammy, focusing solely on household chores and raising their children, did not work outside the home. This left the family struggling to make ends meet. Recognizing the need for a change, Chad chose to apply his journalism education by writing a religious-themed book. In 1999, his first work was published. It turned out to be a collection of religious stories or fantasy narratives with religious themes. Surprisingly, the book became popular and earned him a reasonable amount of money. Given this new income stream, Chad promptly resigned from both his cemetery and newspaper jobs to focus entirely on his writing career. About 18 months later, he published another book titled "One Foot in the Grave." This popular work detailed his experiences as a gravedigger and explored topics such as death, the afterlife, and soul reincarnations. In 2004, Chad founded his own publishing company, Spring Creek Book Company, which allowed him to self-publish his works. His books often reflected his beliefs about the imminent end of the world and Judgment Day. Over time, some observed that Chad's religious beliefs grew more extreme. He published numerous fiction and popular science books imbued with religious themes and started conducting podcasts along with audio and video lectures. These were aimed at helping individuals prepare for what he called the second coming of Christ. Chad described himself as an apocalyptic writer, claiming he could foresee the future and hear voices of the deceased delivering prophecies intended exclusively for him. About Lori Ryan Vallow was born on June 26, 1973 in Loma Linda, California, a picturesque city indeed. She grew up in a big family that included 2 older brothers and 3 sisters. Her parents, Denise and Barry Cox, worked tirelessly to provide for their large brood. From an early age, Lori had a particularly close bond with her brother Alex. They shared a trusting relationship where Alex consistently stood up for Lori and protected her throughout their upbringing. Lori, during her school years, emerged as a remarkable beauty with no lack of admirers. An attractive and charismatic blonde with a slender figure and a captivating smile, she enjoyed being the center of attention. She was known for her spirited and adventurous personality. In the spring of 1992, at the age of 18, Lori married her high school sweetheart, Nelson Anes. They had begun their relationship in her senior year. However, the young couple soon realized they were not ready for family life and had rushed into marriage. Their marriage dissolved within a year, and they did not have any children together. By fall 1995, Lori remarried, this time to a man named William Leah. A year later, they welcomed a son named Colby. Sadly, their marriage ended in 1998, just 2 years after Colby's birth. In early 2001, Lori entered into her 3rd marriage with Joseph Anthony Ryan. He officially adopted Colby from Lori's previous marriage. A year after their union, they had a daughter named Tylee. This marriage also collapsed by 2005. Notably, soon after her divorce from Joseph, an incident occurred when her ex-husband came to visit the children. He was assaulted by Lori's brother Alex, who claimed he was defending his sister's honor as Ryan had allegedly insulted her. As a result, Alex Cox received a fine and served a short prison term. After divorcing her 3rd husband, Lori met Charles Anthony Vallow and married him in February 2006. Despite the significant age difference, Charles being 17 years her senior, it did not create any obstacles for them. Charles had been previously married and had 2 teenage sons from past relationships, Zachary and Nicholas. The couple initially resided in Nevada with Lori's children from previous marriages, while Charles's sons visited during holidays or weekends. Charles owned a small business that provided stable income to support the family. Although Lori did not pursue further education nor work professionally, Charles never reproached her for it. In 2014, the couple officially adopted a young boy named Joshua Jackson, often referred to as JJ Vallow. JJ was Charles's grandnephew and had autism, necessitating expensive therapy that his relatives could afford. Toward the end of 2014, the family decided to move to the Hawaiian Islands, specifically to the island of Kauai. By this time, both Colby and Charles's older children were adults living independently. Thus, the Vallow family relocated to the island as a group of four: Lori, Charles, Tylee, and JJ. The family settled in a well-known tourist area and decided to open their own beach bar. They specialized in fresh juices, smoothies, refreshing drinks, and non-alcoholic cocktails. Despite their efforts and Charles's experience in trade, coupled with the availability of raw materials, the business quickly failed due to intense competition. Around this period, Lori developed an interest in religious literature and was particularly drawn to a series of books titled Standing in Holy Places by Chad Daybell. She became so captivated by Daybell's views and thoughts that she appeared almost obsessed with his ideas. Lori purchased all his works and read them daily. In 2016, the family had to leave Hawaii and return to the mainland United States. They settled in Arizona. While Charles worked hard to provide for the family, Lori increasingly immersed herself in religion, gradually drifting away from reality. By October 2018, Lori attended an event with her close friend Melanie in a neighboring town called Preparing a People for the Second Coming of Christ, led by Chad Daybell. As a dedicated fan and follower of Daybell's teachings, Lori was thrilled at the opportunity to meet him in person. She sat in the front row with her eyes fixed on Chad. He also noticed her among the audience. After the event concluded, when Chad decided to personally engage with his followers, Lori stayed behind as expected. She listened intently to everything he said and even asked if she could touch his hand. Upon doing so, Daybell looked into her eyes and claimed that they had been husband and wife in 7 previous reincarnations. Following this encounter, Chad and Lori exchanged contact information and began communicating daily. A few weeks later, when Lori's husband went to Nevada for work, she invited the preacher to hold a gathering at her home. On that day, about a dozen people gathered at the Vallow residence, discussing God, Judgment Day, and the Second Coming. Lori and Chad also agreed to collaborate on preparing people for the imminent judgment. The pair began conducting podcasts devoted to this event, leading sermons, and writing articles. Lori became increasingly detached from reality and her family. Charles unfortunately did not immediately notice this change. He thought it was just a temporary obsession that would soon pass. By the time he realized how far things had gone, it was already too late. Soon after, Lori began talking about dark spirits and zombies. She told family and friends that she was chosen by God for a special mission. Part of this mission involved destroying dark spirits, demons, and all evil. Charles's attempts to bring his wife back to reality failed. More so, she began to see him as one of the dark entities that needed to be destroyed. By the end of 2018, the marriage between Lori and Charles Vallow was on the brink of collapse. In February 2019, during Charles's week-long business trip, Lori changed all the locks in their shared home. Upon his return, Charles found himself locked out of his own house and noticed his personal car, the family truck, was missing, and discovered that a substantial amount of $35,000 had been withdrawn from his account. One day, Charles loudly called out for his wife and tried to enter the house. Lori, in a frenzied state, rushed outside, hurling threats and curses. She screamed that her husband's soul had long died and his body possessed by a demon, repeatedly exclaiming, "I don't know who you are and what you've done with my husband." Without hesitation, Charles went to the police station and reported Lori for theft and obstruction to his home and children. He expressed concerns about her threats of physical harm against him, leading to the issuance of a protective order. A court order was issued prohibiting Lori approaching Charles. The statements Charles made that evening were documented as part of standard procedure. He spoke about his wife's excessive religious fervor, her belief in an imminent end of the world, and her tendency to classify people as either light or demonic beings. The officers, while asking clarifying questions, openly mocked him, but still issued the protective order. The next day, Charles filed for divorce and changed the beneficiary of his $1 million life insurance policy from Lori to his mother and sister. His lawyer noted that Charles was concerned about the well-being of JJ, who required special care. He knew his mother and sister would responsibly manage the insurance payout and take care of JJ if anything happened to him. As for Tylee, her stepfather had not legally adopted her and couldn't include the legally unrelated minor in the documents. A few months later, Mr. Vallow made the regrettable mistake of revoking the protective order, hoping to reconcile with Lori and save their marriage. He began visiting his ex-wife's home, missing the children, and remained hopeful for a family reconciliation. On July 11, 2019, Charles was fatally shot twice in the chest when he arrived to see his children. Alex Cox, Lori's brother, called emergency services and confessed to the shooting, claiming self-defense. He alleged that Charles attacked him first with a baseball bat. In response, Alex drew a pistol and fired twice without aiming. The incident was witnessed by the homeowner and children. Their testimonies were somewhat consistent. The court ruled it an unintentional killing in self-defense. Notably, Alex's head injury was minor, despite Charles's background as a former baseball player capable of inflicting severe harm with a bat. The same day Charles's body was taken to the morgue, Lori threw a party at the house with music, numerous guests, and a poolside disco, right where her husband had been shot and where traces of blood were still visible. She didn't arrange for his funeral or inform anyone about the incident. Charles's sons, mother, sister, and other relatives only learned about his death a week later when his unclaimed body was still in the morgue. This marked the beginning of a series of mysterious disappearances and fatalities. Shortly after her husband's demise, Lori sold their Arizona home. Along with her children, she relocated to a town called Rexburg in Idaho. They settled close to where Chad and his wife Tammy lived. Alex Cox, Lori's brother, also moved with them and settled in the same housing complex. Lori enrolled her son in a school for children with special needs. However, her 16-year-old daughter Tylee did not attend any educational institution. She was seldom seen outside, leading many neighbors to be unaware of her existence. Around this time, Lori referred to her daughter as a dark entity during a phone conversation with a friend. On September 8, 2019, the children, their mother and Uncle Alex, went to Yellowstone Park, where Chad Daybell joined them. Several photographs from that trip show Tylee, but after that day, she was never seen alive again. On September 24th of the same year, Lori withdrew her son's documents from the school, claiming he would be homeschooled henceforth. The 7-year-old boy also was not seen afterward. Less than a month later, on October 19th, Chad's 49-year-old wife, Tammy, passed away suddenly. According to Chad, she had a cold with a cough and presumably died from respiratory failure in her sleep, with no signs of violence on her body. Her death was ruled natural. Chad categorically refused an autopsy to definitively determine the cause, a decision that oddly raised no suspicions at that time. Following his wife's sudden passing, Chad received approximately $500,000 in insurance payouts. 2 weeks later, Chad and Lori traveled to the Hawaiian Islands, where they officially married in a beachside ceremony. This event came as a total shock and surprise to Daybell's children, who were still mourning their mother and couldn't comprehend their father's actions. Upon returning to Arizona, the couple lived together and misled others by claiming Lori's children were with relatives, or even asserting she had no children at all. They also rented a small unit at a local storage facility, where they later moved all the belongings of the children, as if they had never existed in the home. Another month later, on December 12, 2019, Alex Cox died suddenly in his home. The cause of death appeared to be a heart attack. At his insistence, no autopsy was conducted, and the incident was deemed natural. As time passed, more people persistently questioned Lori about the whereabouts of her children. She skillfully lied to neighbors and acquaintances, but it was more complicated with relatives. Her eldest son, Colby, who had little contact with his mother after moving away, tried earnestly to reach his younger sister. Initially, Lori answered from her daughter's phone, pretending to be Tylee, but Colby soon sensed something was amiss. Meanwhile, Charles's relatives demanded access to JJ. They wanted to take the boy for holidays or weekends, or simply talk to him on the phone. Lori consistently refused or made up absurd excuses. Eventually, the boy's grandmother reported his disappearance to the police, and soon after, Colby also approached the police to find his younger sister. When law enforcement officers knocked on Lori's door and asked her to bring the children for a conversation, she lied that they were visiting relatives. This information proved false, and the police returned to her home. They gave her a week to appear at the police station with the children, but instead she and her husband fled to Hawaii again. On February 20, 2020, Lori was arrested on the island of Kauai and taken back to Arizona. A search was conducted in her and Chad's home, but neither the children nor any signs that they had been there were found. Now her husband Chad, who had been defending her and insisting she had no children, was also under suspicion. It was only on June 9th that police discovered human remains buried in the backyard of the couple's home. Forensic analysis revealed that they were the bodies of Tylee and her younger brother JJ. Chad was immediately detained for concealing evidence and complicity. The authorities then decided to exhume the bodies of Tammy Daybell and Alex Cox to establish the true causes of their deaths. In both cases, traces of chemicals capable of inducing heart failure were discovered. This led to the conclusion that these individuals did not die naturally. The trial process for the spouses began in January 2021. They were charged with conspiring to commit first-degree criminal acts, grand theft through deceit, and insurance fraud. Additionally, the demise of Charles Vallow was reclassified from self-defense to premeditated criminal action. Witnesses in court testified that Lori referred to her children as dark entities and promised to save their souls. There were speculations that the deaths of 16-year-old Ty and 7-year-old JJ might have had ritualistic elements. Notably, the adolescent girl's body was partially burned. Weeks before this, Chad had sent Lori an email rating people where he assigned Tylee, the girl, a 2 as a dark spirit. Given the totality of the charges, both spouses faced the possibility of capital punishment. However, in May 2021, Val's defense team succeeded in having her declared incompetent, halting the trial process. Simultaneously, all 5 of Daybell's adult children insisted on their father's innocence, believing he was framed by Lori and Alex. In 2022, after treatment in a psychiatric facility, Vallow was deemed fit to stand trial again and answer for her actions. In March 2023, the judge ruled out capital punishment as a sentence for her, a decision still being contested by the prosecution. In July of that same year, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The trial against Chad continues, and he still faces the prospect of capital punishment. It is worth noting that this story inspired the book When the Moon Turns to Blood by investigative journalist Lily Sewell. Georgina Kruger was born on April 11, 1992 in Munich. Georgina, often called Jorodzina, was the middle child in a simple household. She had an older brother named Tommy, who was 8 years her senior, and a younger sister named Michelle, who was 2.5 years younger. When Georgina turned 11, her parents decided to divorce. Tommy then chose to live with their father at age 19. After the separation, Jorodzina and Michelle were primarily raised by their mother, Vesna, and maternal grandmother. Both girls excelled academically and participated in music and dance activities, displaying distinct creativity. The family lived modestly. Although their father stayed in touch with his ex-wife and daughters, his focus largely remained on supporting his elder son through educational pursuits and other endeavors. In June 2006, Vesna relocated with her mother and daughters to Berlin after securing a well-paying job there. They moved into Moabit district at house number 8 on Stendhal Street. On September 1st that year, both sisters enrolled at one of the best local schools accessible by bus, despite being situated in another district. Vzna adapted well to her new job and had ambitious plans for their future until unforeseen events disrupted their peaceful existence abruptly. From an early age, Jorodzina harbored a dream of becoming an actress. She loved to sing and dance, dedicating herself wholeheartedly and taking these pursuits very seriously. Inspired by Indian films, she envisioned a career in acting and enthusiastically participated in school theater, attending acting and stage speech courses. Her teachers recognized her talent, forecasting future success and fame for her. Furthermore, Jorodzina possessed a bright, expressive appearance, characterized by a slender feminine figure and notable height for her age. She meticulously cared for herself, keeping abreast of fashion trends and striving to dress stylishly. Jorodzina skillfully applied decorative cosmetics, remarkably well, akin to professional makeup artists. Often back in Munich, she would apply makeup for friends and neighbors with precision. During the summer holidays in Berlin, Jorodzina actively attended various casting calls in attempts to make her breakthrough onto the big screen or television. Though she managed to appear in crowd scenes several times, these roles were quite minor. However, on Friday, September 22, 2006, fortune finally favored her. Jorodzina auditioned for a guest role in the television series Turkish for Beginners, and her candidacy was approved. She was scheduled to receive a callback on Monday, September 25th, to finalize her inclusion in the cast. This callback was set to discuss further details and extend an invitation for contract signing. Jorodzina, the new beauty in town, made a noticeable impact from her very first day at her new school. She immediately captured the attention of all the boys her class. However, when it came to interacting with the girls, she faced significant challenges. They openly envied her and saw her as a competitor. As a result, her classmates were slow to welcome her into their group and often communicated with her reluctantly. Despite these obstacles, Jorodzina remained sociable, friendly, and approachable. She avoided conflicts and tried hard to interact with everyone in the class. This teenage girl wasn't just beautiful. She danced well, sang wonderfully, and even received an offer from a modeling agency to become a photo model. She agreed to the offer, but unfortunately missed the planned photo session scheduled for early October. Jorodzina harbored dreams of making it big in Hollywood or Bollywood one day. She envisioned herself walking on the red carpets of prestigious film festivals amidst celebrities, dreaming of fame, recognition, and film awards. To achieve these aspirations, she was prepared to work diligently on herself. Just as these dreams seemed within reach, Jorodzina suddenly disappeared without a trace, a few miles from home. At that time, she was awaiting confirmation for a role in a TV series and had no doubts about securing it. Throughout that weekend, Jorodzina could think of nothing else but the anticipated call from the studio that would decide her future. She was filled with excitement and inspiration, already imagining herself on set, preparing for her lines. On Monday morning, September 25th, as usual, she headed to school. She was expected back home by 2 p.m., and since the call was expected later that afternoon, Jorodzina asked her grandmother to answer all calls in her absence. The day felt endlessly long for Kruger. Jorodzina's classmates noticed she kept checking the time and seemed unable to focus on her lessons. Given that she had told no one about her casting opportunity, everyone interpreted her anxious state differently. After school ended for the day, Jorodzina gathered her belongings swiftly and rushed to the nearest bus stop. She boarded bus number 27, which she rode daily, and headed towards home. After traveling 3 stops, she got off at Rue Rov, not far from where she lived. Jorodzina Kruger never made it home. Vanishing somewhere halfway from the bus stop to her apartment, she was never seen again, neither alive nor deceased. By 2 in the afternoon, her grandmother, who was waiting for Jorodzina and her sister, had prepared lunch and set the table. Jorodzina was expected first, with Michelle arriving a bit later due to extra classes at music school. It was strange when Jorodzina did not show up because she had no plans to stay out. When Michelle arrived home at 3, the grandmother grew anxious and began calling Georgina, only to find her phone turned off. Subsequent attempts also failed. Anxiety grew further as more time passed. When Georgina's mother returned from work and learned about her daughter's disappearance and unreachable mobile phone, she immediately sensed that something serious had occurred. The first step was contacting the school, where it was confirmed that Georgina had attended all her classes and left by bus as usual. The mother then reached out to several of Georgina's friends, hoping that she might have been delayed talking or stopping at a cafe on her way home. However, all friends confirmed that Georgina appeared in a hurry and headed straight home. Increasingly concerned, they proceeded to the police station and reported the disappearance of the 14-year-old girl. Initially skeptical, law enforcement suspected that Georgina might have gone on a date or visited friends or perhaps argued with a classmate and was sulking alone somewhere. Exhausting all possible scenarios and verifying that the teenager wasn't found in any anticipated locations, detectives then began checking accident reports and calling hospitals, assuming she might have encountered trouble on her way home from school. Yet there were no hospital records for Georgina either. As night approached, extensive searches and witness interviews commenced. It turned out that the last sighting of Georgina was at the bus stop. When she got off the bus and turned the street leading to her home, the schoolgirl was dressed in blue jeans with wear marks, a light blue t-shirt, a denim jacket, and gray sneakers. She carried a pink sports bag with a long, wide strap containing her notebooks, textbooks, and mobile phone. Investigators tracked the girl's movements through her device's signal. She spent the entire day at school, then boarded the bus and got off at her stop. However, approximately halfway to her home, the signal suddenly vanished and never reappeared. The search began on Stendhal Street, where the Kruger family lived. A search team with dogs trained to detect both living and deceased humans was dispatched there. At that point, there was still hope of finding the teenage girl alive and unharmed. Law enforcement checked every home, interviewed all residents and potential witnesses, inspected attics and basements, and spoke with workers at local stores and cafes. No one had seen Georgina. Even dogs couldn't pick up her trail. By the next morning, flyers with the schoolgirl's photo and requests for any information about her were posted all over the city. Dozens of calls came into the police station, reporting sightings of a similarly looking girl in different parts of the city. Unfortunately, all leads turned out to be false. Investigators also began to follow up on all previously convicted local residents, as well as those released on bail. Special attention was given to criminals who had shown an unhealthy interest in minors. However, all these efforts yielded no results. The schoolgirl seemed to have vanished into thin air, not making it home. No traces or personal belongings found, as if she had never existed at all. After several months of fruitless searching, the investigation was suspended due to lack of leads, not a single clue, and no direction left to pursue. About a year after Georgina disappeared, someone called the police anonymously. The caller said her body was at the bottom of a nearby lake. Law enforcement couldn't figure out who made the call, but they decided to check it out anyway. For weeks, skilled divers went through the lake with advanced equipment. They were thorough, examining almost every inch of the lake bed. They found nothing. It was a false lead. Despite this, it got the public interested in the case again. The media began discussing and writing about Georgina's disappearance once more. So another search operation was set up. The police talked to neighbors again and brought in search dogs, although hopes were low since the dogs had not picked up her scent on the day she vanished. A year later, investigators were fairly sure Georgina was no longer alive. However, her family didn't believe it. Her mother made up a story for herself that her daughter had run away to India and was now in Bollywood films, dancing and singing as she always wanted to. These thoughts comforted her mother and helped her carry on for the sake of her younger daughter. Efforts to find Georgina resumed from time to time. In 2016, nearly 10 years after she vanished, a resident of Stendhal Street contacted police about a troubling neighbor who invited underage girls over regularly. This neighbor was a 35-year-old Turkish immigrant named Ali K. Publicly, Ali K appeared to be an exemplary family man. He was married and raising 3 kids. But closer investigation worried police officers as they delved into his background and personality. 4 years earlier, he had already been under suspicion and investigated by authorities due to concerning behavior patterns. At that time, he deceitfully lured a local schoolgirl by promising to sell her a trendy smartphone at a symbolic price. He took the girl to his storeroom, located in the basement of the apartment building. There, he struck her on the head and coerced her into intimate closeness. Afterward, he made the teenager swear she wouldn't tell anyone about what happened. He then her a paper napkin to wipe her tears and helped her tidy up before leaving. The girl promised to remain silent, just to escape from his clutches. But as soon as she was free, she immediately told her parents about the incident, and together, they went to the police to report the violent actions. The schoolgirl detailed the man's storeroom in the basement, noting that it looked more like a maniac's den. Ali was arrested that same day, but vehemently denied his guilt and shared his own version of the events. According to him, he was indeed selling the gadget, and the girl herself expressed a desire to buy it. As the smartphone was in his basement storeroom, they went down together. When the guest examined the device, she said that she had always dreamed of such a gadget, but since she didn't have the money, she was ready to pay in another way. Following this, according to Ali, the girl began kissing him and started undressing. He tried reasoning with her, but ended up pushing her away forcefully, causing her to fall and hit her head. This explained the injury and bruises on her body. However, the fact of intimate closeness could not be proven, as Ali had used a contraceptive, which he later disposed of. Ali's wife Melik fully supported her husband and also began accusing the girl of indecent behavior and attempts to seduce her husband. Ultimately, Ali received only a suspended sentence for causing moderate bodily harm. Nonetheless, as soon as the police took up investigation into the disappearance of Kruger again, they decided to check him thoroughly once more. Ali K did not have a permanent job and got by on odd jobs, mainly living on benefits. He loved gambling and often incurred debts. Being a regular visitor at a Turkish coffee shop on the ground floor of his building allowed him to make acquaintances who treated him to food and drinks. Despite his precarious lifestyle, Ali carefully maintained his appearance, desperately trying to look younger than his years, wearing fashionable clothes even if it meant spending children's benefits on them. The main oddity about Ali K was his attraction to young girls, which raised several flags during this renewed investigation into Kruger's disappearance. To ensure that the suspect wouldn't become suspicious and would feel secure, a special agent codenamed Hakan was prepared and sent in. He posed as a successful businessman who had recently moved to the Moabit area to open a car service station. A few times, he visited the cafe in Ali's building, loudly discussing business plans and details with a partner. As they left, the partner mentioned the need to find a manager soon, noting that it was a well-paying position and that it was important to choose wisely. After these words, the second man left, while Hakan stayed to finish his coffee. Suddenly, Ali approached and sat at his table. He immediately offered himself for the manager position. A conversation ensued, which quickly turned into a casual chat. The businessman noted that Ali might fit the role and then mentioned the salary. Ali's eyes lit up at the figure. He began dreaming of paying off his debts and buying the sports car he had always wanted. The men exchanged phone numbers, and from that day on, they began communicating regularly. Their relationship quickly grew into a friendship. Hakan even started taking Ali on business trips to other cities, aiming to get closer to him and gain his trust. But this friendship had an unexpected effect. As the suspect tried to appear as the best version of himself to his prospective employer, he boasted of his achievements, even minor ones, and preferred to stay silent about any wrongful acts. Several months later, Realizing that the case was not progressing, the investigation decided to introduce another agent, this time a woman who would play Hawkins' girlfriend. This introduced Susan into the scenario. Her goal was to befriend Ali's wife Melik and try uncover any secrets her husband might be keeping. It only took a few meetings for them all to get along well, after which all four started socializing as families. Melik was sociable, but regarded her husband as nearly a saint. For years, she had turned a blind eye to his infidelities, did not believe the schoolgirl who accused him of violence, and remained convinced her husband was simply unlucky with jobs, despite being a very good person in her eyes. But now, everything would change soon. Susan realized that Ali's wife wasn't just covering for him. She truly believed he was incapable of harming. The agents decided to use a trick by spreading a rumor that progress had been made in the Crew case, and an unnamed source had indicated where to find her body. Hakan left a newspaper with this article in his car, which Ali had started borrowing occasionally. Several cameras and recording devices were also installed in this car. When the suspect and his wife got into the car, she soon noticed the newspaper left behind, quickly skimmed the article, showed a bit of surprise that the case was still being investigated, and then, indifferently, put the paper aside. It became clear that Melik knew nothing about this. Otherwise, she would have inadvertently revealed herself. 6 months later, the investigation finally concluded that their plan had failed. The K family had become friends with the agents, even trusting them to look after their children. But no confessions were forthcoming. Ali strived to appear honest and upright, and his wife was simply unaware of the crime her husband had committed. Maintaining their cover was becoming increasingly expensive. They even had to lease a space for the supposed auto repair shop and sign a sham employment contract with Ali to avoid raising his suspicions. The investigation then took a desperate last step by introducing another agent who would play a villainous role. According to the backstory, his name was Kaur. He was Hakan's cousin, had a criminal record, and was running some underground business. The hope was that Ali, meeting a kindred spirit, would open up and confess his sins. The men quickly bonded over their shared interests. Kaur treated his new friend to drinks, and together they visited various clubs and houses of ill repute. The new friend confessed that he made money through not entirely legal means and thus wanted to spend it indulgently, with Ali willingly helping him in this endeavor. Simultaneously, Kaur constantly complained about his girlfriend, with whom he supposedly could not break up because she was blackmailing him and threatening to report his illegal business to the police. According to him, she was constantly demanding money, and her needs were growing. One day, while having drinks with a friend, Kaur declared that he intended to rid himself of the bothersome blackmailing girlfriend in a radical way and was willing to pay 100,000 euros to anyone who would do the work. Ali perked up at this and offered to take on the task himself. His friend agreed but suggested they discuss the details in a secluded place when sober. In November 2017, during a monstrous confession while sitting in a car, the men discussed the plan to eliminate Kaur's nuisance girlfriend. At one point, Kaur doubted whether Ali was capable of taking a life. In response, Ali revealed something he claimed no one else knew. He confessed that more than 11 years ago, he had taken someone's life with his bare hands. Ali stated that in 2006, a stunning young girl had moved onto his street and completely captivated him. She passed by his house twice a day on her way to and from school, so he memorized her schedule and would step out to greet her and pay compliments. Despite her young age, he described her as attractive and felt intense desire for her. One warm September day, when the girl was returning from school and the street was unusually quiet and deserted, Ali saw his chance. He asked a neighbor girl to help him move some items from his storage area, and she kindly agreed, not sensing any danger. Once they were in the basement, he locked the door and tried to kiss the schoolgirl, who struggled and screamed. He then knocked her unconscious with a blow to the head and took advantage of her. After the incident, afraid she might report him to the police, he decided not to let her go. He grabbed her throat with his hands and squeezed as hard as he could. Ali described this process in detail, explaining how he felt the crunch and sensed the pulse in her neck fade away. The girl's body lay in the basement for several days. If the search team had looked into his storage area during this time, they would have immediately uncovered the perpetrator, but no one suspected anything, and once bar. The commotion had died down. He wrapped the body in an old rug and disposed of it in a garbage bin, which went directly to the landfill. Ali's confessions were recorded on a camera installed in Cora's car. By the evening of that same day, he was taken into. Unfortunately, the girl's remains were never found, as the waste at the landfill was regularly incinerated. Her body was essentially cremated. The trial and verdict. The hearings in this case lasted another 2.5 years before a final verdict was delivered. The criminal adamantly denied any wrongdoing, claiming that he had fabricated the entire story to gain Cora's trust. In reality, he planned to rescue his girlfriend by turning in his friend to the police as soon as he received the money. No additional evidence was found besides the criminal's own confession. However, his detailed and vivid account was enough to convince the jury of his guilt. In March 2020, nearly 14 years after Georgina's disappearance, Ali K was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of ever being released. His wife Malik never believed in her husband's guilt, convinced that he had implicated himself while pursuing a noble cause.